Matsun was never so glad he was the one chosen for a challenge before. Though to give Maki some credit, he was sure his boyfriend would probably be careful about it if he was the one doing the challenge. Or he wouldn't do it at all. Matsun believed that wholeheartedly. But this way, there was hopefully no harm in asking a question like that. Hopefully. Not that he expected Maki to not care in case he actually died. He knew his boyfriend well enough to be aware of the vast difference between his jokester and his more serious sides. Despite what people usually said, Maki could get serious when the situation asked for it. I just hope he's not going to take this too seriously. That would be a bummer. Shrugging, he fished out his keys and entered their apartment, surprised to see the lights turned off. Hiro? He could swear he heard the sound of crickets when the only answer he got was silence. Frowning, he kicked off his shoes and went further inside, half expecting someone to suddenly jump at him from the dark. But there was no one. No stranger, but also no trace of his boyfriend, except for the small bag he forgot on the table in the morning. Seems like he didn't get home yet. Weird. He didn't say he would be late. He checked his phone again, but there were no messages or missed calls, and the time suggested Maki should have already been home. And yet... He was just about to go back to the hallway to undress when something heavy hit the door. The loud sound startled him, his heart jumping into his throat. He quickly chased away the thoughts of it being robbers or some other unpleasant individuals, since they would hardly make such a fuss, and headed to the door. His reasoning proved to be correct when he heard the key being turned in the lock, or rather trying since he didn't lock behind him, before the door flung open, revealing disheveled-looking Maki with several bags in his hands. He looked as surprised as Matsun, his chest heaving heavily, but soon a wide grin spread on his face. Oh hey, I didn't know you were home already. Can you help me with these? It's all heavy as heck. Shaking off his surprise, Matsun moved to drag half of the bags inside, his curiosity growing with every passing second. What even is this? Where were you? I thought we got broken in or that you got kidnapped when I couldn't find anyone here. A light yet slightly embarrassed laugh rang behind him. Yes, sorry about that. I thought I could make it home before you, so I didn't tell you I'm in the store. I wanted to surprise you with dinner, but I guess that's not going to happen today. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Aw, were you worried about me? Matsun clicked his tongue and hauled the bags on the counter before starting to unload them, raising his eyebrow over some of the items he found. Obviously, I wouldn't be happy if something happened to you, you know that. There was a short pause, after which arms wrapped around his middle from behind. He let Maki pull him a bit back, a soft smile curling his lips when Maki laid his head on his shoulder. I don't think you have to worry about me getting kidnapped. I'm sure they would quickly return me if I said my boyfriend will curse them when he finds out. Is that what you threaten people with? Nah, I don't want to spread more stigma around funeral home employees. But it would be fun, don't you think? Despite the ache deep in his soul, Matsun let out a short, surprisingly genuine laugh. Yeah, probably. Though I think they would return you anyway with how chatty you get. Hey, you said you like it. Still smiling, Matsun turned around in Maki's arms and hooked his own around his boyfriend's neck, for a moment admiring his beloved's features. I do, but I'm already used to it. Some stranger definitely isn't. So if you ever find yourself getting kidnapped, just talk a hole through their head. Maki snickered, making his heart beat faster. He let himself enjoy the closeness for a bit longer before clearing his throat. While we are on this, would you be worried about me? If I suddenly went missing? Raising his eyebrow, Maki looked at him as if his question was the biggest offense to him. Of course. I would search far and wide to find you, spend the last yen from our account to get you back, Shaved my head in worry. What if I died suddenly? Then I would take over your job and make you the biggest, most amazing and beautiful funeral this country had ever seen. Matsun rolled his eyes, but he would lie if he said Maki's answer surprised him, or made him sad. On the contrary, it was probably the thing he needed to hear. That's so you. That's why you love me. His face turned serious, enough for Matsun to pause. Joking aside, though, it would be difficult if you suddenly weren't around anymore. Since, you are the more mature of the two of us. You know much more about life, and I would miss that stability you bring into my life. Besides other things, of course. So please don't die on me suddenly, okay? Be careful with yourself. Matsun was rendered speechless for a moment. He didn't need to be a mind reader to see the deeply hidden sorrow in Maki's eyes, or the silent plea in his voice. He pulled Maki to his chest, squeezing him in a tight embrace. For whose sake, he wasn't sure, but he definitely needed a hug to feel his partner close. I will be. I promise. But you promised me the same thing, okay? That goes without saying. Dai, you should be resting, not staring into the phone. Despite the still very much present dull pain in his whole body, Daichi had to chuckle. You sound like my parent. Well, if caring about your health makes me a parent, I'll take it. Sighing softly, Daichi laid down his phone and shifted slightly on the bed into a more comfortable position, for the first time in 3 days not hissing with the slightest movement. Hayato had to notice it too, as the usual huge bright smile Daichi missed so much appeared on his lips. He put down the tray with food he just brought from the cafeteria and sat down next to the bed, bringing Daichi's hand to his lips to leave a light kiss on his fingers. Daichi blushed. At least some things seemed to come back to normal. It had been a rough time for both of them. Despite Daichi's and the doctor's reassurances, Hayato refused to leave his side even for a moment, with the only exceptions of bringing food and going to bathroom, holding his hand at all times as if he was scared Daichi could deteriorate if he let go. And while Daichi was glad he had Hayato by his side through the worst parts of his treatment, his stubbornness worried him. He startled when Hayato lightly pinched his cheek. Don't space out on me, sweetheart. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. Did you say something? Nah, I just don't want you to start overthinking stuff again. Daichi huffed quietly, a little pout settling on his lips. You are the one to talk. You haven't gone home since you brought me clothes. Because I want to be here for you in case you needed something. Before Daichi could object that he was fine and under the medical personnel's surveillance, Hayato gave him a slightly reprimanding look. Besides, don't think I don't know how much you neglected yourself while I was at hospital. 3 days are nothing against that. It's not a competition. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean I'll just leave you here and go home when you are unwell. He took Daichi's hand into both of his, entwining their fingers together and leaving a light kiss on the ring. I know we aren't married yet, but in good and worse, in health and sickness, it's not just during marriage. So I'm going to make sure you are okay, and then we can go home together. Daichi bit his lip to hide the starting quivering. He was getting a bit too emotional recently, he knew, but Hayato didn't seem to mind. On the contrary, he seemed glad and always noted he is happy he wasn't hiding his feelings anymore, which just sent Daichi further down the swirl of emotions. He knew he didn't have to be afraid anymore. No one was waiting for him to drop his guard. No sharp words ever came when he laughed or cried. His head was difficult to convince sometimes, but Hayato never gave up. And Daichi couldn't be more grateful. But the more he was worried about the result of the challenge. The threat of him suddenly dying because his body decided for him was hanging above his head for as long as he remembered. and the recent incident only brought it up more. He wasn't lying. He had no idea what happened or why he suddenly started to bleed into his joints and many big muscles when everything was alright in the morning. The doctors weren't able to tell him what exactly went wrong with his blood either, which only increased their anxiety. Taichi couldn't remember Hayato ever looking so lost and desperate as he did in those moments. It passed since then, and Hayato returned to being his usual bubbly self, but Taichi was sure that deep down, his partner was thinking the same thing as him. What if it happened again? What if it was worse the next time? It was natural to ask that, Taichi thought, even when they didn't talk out loud about it. But it also meant the challenge could go horribly wrong for them. Tai. He snapped out of his thoughts, finding Hayato looking at him with a mix of the usual tenderness and concern in his eyes. Taichi sighed. I'm sorry. What's on your mind today, love? You can tell me, you know that. I'll help if I can. Taichi hesitated. On one hand, he hated the idea he could cause Hayato even more anguish by asking the question. On the other, though, they had to talk about the possibility at some point. I was just thinking, with everything that's going on with my blood, what would you do if I died? All color drained from Hayato's face. Taichi cringed, inwardly berating himself for bringing it up now when he was still in hospital. But it was too late to take it back. Aya, why would you even ask that? You are fine. Why would you think about that? Clenching his jaw, Taichi gently tugged on Hayato's hand to ease his grip on his other hand before his skin could start bruising. That was the last thing his partner needed. Because this might not be the only instance when something like this could happen. I want you to be ready for the possibility that I might... No, stop. Please. Taichi's heart sank when Hayato got up abruptly as if he got burned and strode a few steps away, turning his back to him while gripping on the edge of the other bed. Seeing the way his knuckles turned pale and his chest heaving, Taichi wanted nothing more than to be able to get up and hug him to offer at least some form of comfort, even though he wasn't sure if it would be appreciated. But his body didn't care, and he suppressed a pained cry when he tried to sit up and his joints moved. Hayato was immediately back by his side, pushing him back on the bed. Don't get up. You'll hurt yourself again. I know. But don't do that, okay? I'm sorry, it was a reflex. I didn't mean to walk away from you. It just shocked me that you would even think about that. Sighing, Taichi eased himself back on the bed with Hayato's help, the pain slowly subsiding. But it's not out of question. No, stop. Stop talking like that. I know hemophilia is nasty and unpredictable, but you'll be fine. We just have to be more careful in the future. You can't keep denying it. It won't change anything. Take what happened now. Who knows when my blood decides to destroy me again? Exactly because it's nasty, you should be prepared that maybe I won't be around for as long as you would wish for. It pained him to say it. He hated causing Hayato more pain. But the possibility was here. Nothing but a miracle could change that. His heart shattered upon seeing Hayato's eyes glossing over. He instinctively reached up to wipe the tears away, but Hayato caught his hand, shaking his head before letting out a shuddered breath. I refuse to think about you dying when you are still here. Aya. Wait, let me speak. I know the danger is here, but I'm not going to let it taint our lives. I want to enjoy being with you, not worry every day that I may have seen you for the last time. That's not a life I want. I want to be with you, marry you, and then live like we were about to. Happy and content. Living for the present, not worrying about the future. Remember? We promised that to each other before. Taichi's vision hazed. And we always keep promises, right? Damn right. The flat felt strangely silent in the last few days. Washio wasn't sure if it was because of Konoha almost fainting on him out of nowhere, or if it was solely his fault for allowing himself to fall back into what Konoha called a brooding state. But in his defense, he didn't expect his first proposal attempt to go so bad. If he could even call it an attempt, since he didn't get to anything before he had to catch Konoha to prevent him from hurting himself with the fall. Sighing, he turned the ring in his fingers for about 10th time in the last few minutes, the deep red gem set in the middle of it reminding him of blood. Maybe Ruby wasn't the best idea. He shook his head and clutched the ring in his hand, holding it over his heart. He knew why he chose Ruby as the main gem. It had nothing to do with what happened, and it definitely wasn't some omen for the future. Everything was fine. He wasn't the first one to choose Ruby for an engagement ring after all, right? It's fine. Just bad timing. Nothing more. He desperately wanted to believe that. Tatsu, we should leave soon, or it's going to be too busy. He quickly put the ring back into the box, hiding it at the safe place he prepared for it in his nightstand, before grabbing his sports bag and rushing to meet Konoha in the living room. They were supposed to head to a gym together for the first time in several years, and Washio would lie if he said he wasn't more than just a little surprised when Konoha suggested it last week. At first, he was excited they could spend more time together. The fact that he could see his boyfriend in his sports shorts was just an added bonus. But after the events of the last few days, he became more hesitant. Despite Konoha reassuring him he was fine, Washio couldn't stop thinking of all the possible scenarios that could happen, one worse than the other. But the more he brought it up, Konoha seemed more and more dejected. He didn't have to be a mind reader to know what went through Konoha's mind in those moments, and so he eventually agreed to go together, the prospect of hurting Konoha again being much scarier than any potential injury. Because injuries were just that, potential. On the other hand, making Konoha think he didn't want to be around him was too real of a possibility. That was the last thing he wanted Konoha to think just before a proposal. Coming! Despite his inner turmoil, he felt a smile curling his lips when he saw Konoha all ready with his own sports bag and 2 bottles with joint drinks. Yeah, really excited for this. Konoha flashed him a bright smile of his own, almost bouncing in place as he handed him one of the bottles. Of course I am. It's been ages since we went together. We've done a lot of things together. Yeah, but I don't usually see you exercise outside your matches, so this is special. His lips curled into a sly grin as he tugged on Washio's collar, spiking his heart rate up. Though maybe we should have practiced here before going out. I'm not sure if I'll be able to handle it when you get into workout. Washio rolled his eyes and pulled Konoha closer by his waist, eliciting a surprised squeal out of his boyfriend that got immediately turned into a soft hum by his lips pressed against Konoha's. In all honesty, he surprised even himself with the gesture, but now that he had Konoha in his arms, he couldn't bring himself to let go. Konoha had to notice his reluctance and stood up on his tiptoes to steal a much shorter kiss from him before he snuggled under his chin. You are still worried, aren't you? Is it that obvious? Pretty much. But I swear I'm fine. I wouldn't risk it if I wasn't sure about that. Sighing, Washio looked away, his hand tightening instinctively on Konoha's sides. He knew that. Of course he knew that. He trusted Konoha wouldn't do anything risky just to go to gym together. But still. I'm just worried. You fainted without any warning. I didn't know what to do. And I don't know what I would do if something worse happened. A strange mix of emotions flashed across Konoha's face before he threw himself around Washio's neck, burying his face in his shoulder. I'm sorry. Huh? For what? For scaring you. I I didn't want that. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't know. A humorless chuckle escaped Konoha's mouth. But I should have. I should have told you that. He paused and looked up, his eyes full of remorse and lips pressed tightly together. I'm sorry. I I can't imagine how it had to feel. Just thinking about if you suddenly fell in front of me. And what if I died? What would you do? Konoha froze in his arms. That escalated quickly. I'm sorry. I really am. Please don't be mad. The realization that his question could be easily taken as guilt-tripping hit Washio like a truck. He cupped Konoha's cheeks, guilt jabbing in his chest upon seeing tears pooling in the corners of his boyfriend's eyes. I can't be mad at you, remember? I didn't mean it like that. It was just a challenge. Letting out a shattered breath, Konoha gripped his wrists and leaned more into the touch when Washio gently wiped the tears from his lashes. Sorry. I'm panicking over nothing, aren't I? It's alright. It was a bad timing, I know. I'm curious about it, but I shouldn't have asked. He felt Konoha slowly relaxing into the embrace and let out a relieved sigh before mentally kicking himself. What was supposed to be a nice and fun outing turned sour and teary instead, even before it started, just because of his worries and the challenge. I would be so lonely without you. Washio blinked in surprise, Konoha's voice so quiet that for a moment he wasn't sure if he heard right. Really? It's not like you need me around that much. He winced when Konoha punched his shoulder. How can you even say that? We've been together for 5 years. You are my anchor, my safe space. Even just your presence is so calming, and so don't ever say you aren't needed. Don't you dare! His voice broke at the end, effectively breaking Washio's heart in the same way. He tightened his embrace, letting Konoha to settle his mind in peace while he tried to contain the raging battle of his own emotions. Hearing Konoha's words stirred the deep feelings in his chest, turning his heart into a pile of mush, and at the same time solidifying his decision. But not now. Better time will come.